TorahCafe.com.
Tonight will be Tu B'Av, the 15th day of Av, which is the mid of the month, full moon. And as the Talmud, or as the tradition actually is this time we start to wish each other a Ksiva V'Chsima Teva, a good Gebench Yor, a sweet new year. Rosh Hashanah is around the corner, even though it seemingly is 6 weeks away. Nonetheless, we start already at this point. So how do we look at Rosh Hashanah, the new year, or better yet, Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year? Thomas Cahill, an Irish-American Catholic, wrote a book called The Gift of the Jews. And in it he says, what is perhaps ultimately the greatest gift that the Jews have given is a sense of time. The pagans and the Greeks looked at time as circular, and therefore everything was basically a repetition, and hence not only a repetition, but you're really going nowhere. And since you know going nowhere, been there, done that, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you shall also go nowhere, die, right? That was their view of the world. What is the Jewish view? We're moving forward. We're going towards purpose. There is meaning. He claims that this is a complete novelty from pagan times, from Greek philosophers, that the Jews brought this notion of moving forward. Hasidus puts it a little differently and says it is not circular, but spiral. So hence, when we come to this Rosh Hashanah, yes, we will be hearing the shofar once again, and we could experience it as been there, done that, and it's, same old stuff. We got to do our duty. Or if we look at it as a spiral, meaning we're at the same point, but at a higher point. There's a new light of God that's infusing the world, and hence, new opportunities. It is the head of the year. Head is where the vitality comes for the rest of the body. And hence this beginning of this new year brings a new light and new vitality into the world. So if we look back at the 6 days of creation, we see that on the 6th day of creation, the pinnacle of creation, Adam is created. If we compare Adam as opposed to the rest of creation, we see that everything else was created in a multitude. Many different species of animals, many different types of vegetation, but Adam is singular. As a matter of fact, there is no plural for the word Adam. No Adamim. It's Adam, singular. The Talmud tells us, why is this? And one of the explanations is given is because Bishvili Nivra Ha'elam, because the world was created for Adam, for man. It was created entirely for Adam to subdue the world, to use it out in divine service, the service of God, for a higher purpose. So this concept that the whole world is created for Adam, for us, the pinnacle of creation, we could see this in two possible ways, that we need to subdue the entire world and to use it out in divine purpose. See it in an external way or an internal way. External would be that we see the rest of creation as actually a competition, in a sense. There's the human being that has a mission to subdue everything in this world, to use it for a higher purpose. But we see competing forces in the world. And it's either us or them type of mentality. Either I conquer the world, or the world will conquer me. So, for example, either, I conquer food or the food will conquer me, right? Either in my relationships also I see that there's competition because another person takes up my space. And therefore, either I'm doing, or being subdued. That's an external way to see. And it's not a very healthy way. It's a very competitive way of seeing everything that we have a relationship with. A deeper way, a more internal way, is to see that man is actually a microcosm of the entire universe. So there isn't me and other things. Really, the other things are a part of me. There's a dimension of everything in the world that is to be found in my mind and my heart, and ultimately in my soul. And hence, when I deal with any other element of the world, whatever it might be, I have to find it from within, that element within me, how that relates to me, and then deal with it. That's internal. There's nothing extraneous. There's no exterior experience of anything that you're dealing with. It all comes from within our context. I'm going to give examples to this as we go along to clarify this point, to make sure that we have a proper clarity. This is what Hasidus teaches, the inner dimension of Torah, that when we study Torah, for example, its external study of Torah would be teaching about things we need to do. The internal learning of Torah is teaching on how it's a reflection of me, that which I am engaged in. So therefore, it comes from the inner dimension of the soul of the individual, rather than I have to deal with this issue, with this problem, with this person, with this situation. Let's begin, and we'll give examples as we go along. The world is created, when we say we're a microcosm of the entire world, into 4 elements. Daimim, inanimate. Tsemeach, vegetation. Chaya, living animals. And medaber, the human being. Communicator, actually, is the actual term for a human, a communicator. And all those elements we have within ourselves. Hence, when we deal with anything in the world, we're not dealing again with anything outside, but the way we need to view it first is from within. So let's begin with a story to bring this idea out. The story takes place in 1891, yes. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, was an 11-year-old boy. He was walking with his father, the Rebbe Rashab, in a beautiful field, and his father was teaching him or explaining to him and having a discussion with him about God's providence, how God is found in everything, the realness of God. And he was so engaged that the 11-year-old, in the words of his father, without thinking, he rips a leaf from a tree and crumbles it in his hand. Not meaning to do any harm to the leaf, but without thought. His father witnesses, and he says, he's aghast. How could you be so insensitive to a leaf, uprooted from where its nourishment and growth it needs to partake in? And you just wantonly uprooted it from its life, from its source. Now, we all have a part in us that is like that tree, like that leaf. The human condition is that we seek growth. And therefore we can relate to this story either in an external way or an internal way. The Rebbe Rashab is telling his son, relate to this experience because you know what it means to be rooted and to grow. And don't wantonly take something and uproot it from its place of growth. What does that mean to us? So, for example, there's a mitzvah in the Torah of hospitality. So we could do it in an external way or an internal way. External way would be, it's a mitzvah. Motivation is, it's a command from God. It's something that I'm expected. I do it perhaps because, if I'm not very hospitable, what will these people think of me? So we're not reflecting or dealing with the mitzvah of being hospitable in an internal way. It's just how I will be perceived, and because I'm forced, it's a mitzvah, something I have to do. What would be the internal way to do it? Would be recognizing that this person, perhaps by way of example, I'm giving this by way of example, has been uprooted. They come from a country that they now have come to, they feel lost. They're uprooted from their source. Hospitality means to make someone comfortable, that they feel rooted again, that they feel connected. They don't feel a disconnect. So when we have that mindset that we understand what it means to be uprooted, when we see someone in that manner, we will deal with them in a different way. It's a mitzvah to what's called a shiva call. Montreal, where I hail from, is probably the capital of shivas. An older community, and people are traditional, and it's a very traditional thing to make a shiva call. Why? So the external expression would be, to my friend, I feel, some kind of devotion perhaps, or I feel, I've got to be there. Or it could be that what we need to do is the mitzvah of comfort. Why are we comforting? Because these people, whoever's sitting shiva, is uprooted from their source of life, from a mother that passed away, from a brother that passed away, that one sits shiva for, and one feels uprooted. And we understand from ourselves, from our own context, what that means. And therefore, we want to comfort that they should feel rooted back within the community. What do we say to people while they're just sitting shiva? Hamokum yenachem islem. May God comfort you. Amongst the rest of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. What do you mean the rest of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem? Meaning, the comfort is that what you are going through and uprooted is something that we understand because we're also uprooted. Because any loss of an individual Jew is a collective loss of the entire Jewish world. And hence we say that you should be comforted amongst all of us because we all sense to some degree that uprooted from that connection that we had to this individual who was lost. So again, this is taking from a world of vegetation, internalizing the message, and then relating it back to our day-to-day experiences of what we're engaged in. That's vegetation. Now, the animal kingdom. It's an interesting law that one is not allowed to sit down to their dinner if you are a farmer, for example, and you have animals, until you feed them. You have to be responsible for your living animals, and you have to feed them before you can sit down and take pleasure in your meal. So what's the external reason for this mitzvah? Responsibility. They can't take care of themselves. They can't go to the cupboard and take out the dog food or whatever, the animal feed. You are responsible. There's a me and there's a you, or the animal in this instance, and you are responsible. But that's external. Internal means the following. You know what it means to go hungry. We've all been hungry at some point. Not here, of course, at the JOI retreat. Maybe I'm not speaking at the right time about this, but we've all experienced hunger in our lives. Who goes hungry? The body and the animal soul. Not the godly soul, but the body and the animal soul goes hungry. What does this mean? That when we understand what hunger means, that we can then be empathetic even to an animal that shouldn't go hungry and feed them. By the way, this is not go find all the stray dogs in your community and stray cats. This is not what it means at all. There is the SPCA that will take care of them. This means if you have the farm animals and you're responsible towards them, this is what we need to do. So it can be responsibility that something's external, or we relate to it something internal. In other words, I understand hunger. I felt it once before, whether it was Yom Kippur or another time. And now I'm taking that feeling and I'm bringing it outwards to be empathetic to someone else who is now experiencing that. And perhaps this is actually why we have an animal soul. Is not that we should experience suffering and kvetch about it, but we should experiencing suffering so then we can sublimate it and now be there for another who is now suffering. So in other words, what we're taking is our animal soul and turning it inside out. Not making a mirror looking at me and woe is me, but actually turning it inside out and taking those feelings that I have and using them for another. So, an example, tzedakah, charity. So what would the external reason for doing charity be? It's an obligation. You're forced. I got to go into my pocket. God wants that. So you do it. It's fine. That's wonderful. Or, for example, sometimes people look at another individual. They're down and out, and they consider them a chesed project. You know, you're my project. Why? Because, of course, you get brownie points when you do a chesed, a kindness to another. That's external. That's not the way to deal with things. Internal means, as we said, we have an animal soul. We know what it means to be down and out. We have been there, whether it's sometimes being locked out of the home and you couldn't get in, so you know, with the sense of being homeless for the moment, or whether it's hunger, or whether it's someone that is in need emotionally, in need spiritually. We know what that means and how that feels. So now what we're able to do is to do charity out of empathy, because it's coming from within. It's not forced. Moving up the ladder, where do we come? Medaber, to the human being. So let's ponder this for a moment. Could you imagine you're the CEO of a free America from hunger, and you have done it. You have freed America from its hunger. There is not a single person that is now hungry in America. It's an amazing achievement, no doubt. But what have you actually done? You've treated this person, it's a mitzvah, I don't want to make a mistake over here, but you've treated this person merely as an animal. Because that's the obligation you have towards animals. So yes, you're doing it for the human, but you have not done something that's human for them. You've done something that you have to do for an animal too. Your animal, your responsibility. So you've done a wonderful mitzvah, and don't get me wrong, that would be an amazing accomplishment, no doubt, something messianic. But to say that that's sufficient, that's the fulfilling an obligation that's external rather than something that's from within. So what am I to give to a human being that is beyond what my obligation would be just to feed the animal of the person, the body of the individual? After all, is that what defines the human being merely? Obviously not. So what do I need to do? We need to confer purpose on the human being. Animals do not live for purpose. The human being does. So when we want to relate to another individual and merely not uproot them and make them have a sense of comfort, and we want to give them to their basic needs of food and shelter and clothing, that's wonderful. But we need to go the next step and confer purpose on them. What does that mean exactly? Talmud says there are no two faces alike, and no two minds alike. Sorry, but I've added something to the Talmud, and that is there's no two thumbprints alike. Why? Why is that? Because every human being has a unique imprint they need to make in this world. A unique imprint. This week we studied from Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 4. Ben Zoma, the first chapter, the first Mishnah says, who is a wise person? And what's the answer? Someone who can learn from every individual. Why would that make you wise? Why would that make you wise? Very simply, when you believe that every human being is created in the image of God, and therefore they have a unique imprint that they need to make in this world, even though they may not be living it at this moment, if you truly believe that when you will encounter that person, you will confer purpose on them in your interaction, and you will bring out that hidden quality in them, the unique imprint they need to make in this world. As someone who truly believes this, and one of the hats that I wear, is I run a crisis addiction center, Chabad Lifeline, back in Montreal. And when you deal with someone who has fallen to the lowest of the low, but yet you really believe that they have the image of God within them and they have a unique imprint, when you're devoted to that, you can get them out from the lowest of the low and bring them to the greatest of heights based on this idea. That's how you can learn, because truly an individual is created in the image of God. There is that unique imprint, as buried as it might be in addiction and whatnot. It's there, and if you're committed to it, you will find it, and you will help that person to rise to their purpose. With this, we can understand now how Torah then looks at every human being and confers purpose by 7 Noahide laws, 7 universal laws of all of mankind. That is an obligation of all of humanity. And with this, we can also appreciate that for a couple thousand years, Jews couldn't do anything about that. Because could you imagine back in Krakow 200 years ago, if you would get up and say, Mr. Johnson, you know, there's 7 Noahide laws that give purpose to your life, would have brought a pogrom. But today, in our day and age, the Rebbe spoke, and his words reverberate today, that we have an obligation to all of humanity. When we can understand that they are created in the image of God, and they have a unique imprint that they need to make, we will not just deal with them because, listen, they're good to do business with. Or as Rabbi Jacobson said, they're good to fly with. Friday night, if you recall. But you will actually deal with them not as a means to your benefit, but how you are there to benefit them as a teacher of God's teachings, as a light unto the nation. All based on a simple idea that our relationship to another is because of the image of God that we all share, and therefore recognizing the unique quality that every person has. And incidentally, that image of God is just as God is one, his unique image is imprinted uniquely on every individual. Did I leave anything out? Actually, I left something out from the beginning. The inanimate. That's what's left. What does it mean? How do you relate to the inanimate? God forbid you have stones in your gallbladder. You want to relate that way. It's definitely not what we're talking about. Very simply put, the inanimate is part of God's plan. Every stone, everything in this world is placed exactly where it's supposed to be. And when we understand that God's will is not just, and His providence is not just over humanity, and in particular the Jewish people, but it is even on a simple little stone, that wherever it's placed, it's there part of a bigger plan in God's purpose, and it's there to be used in the service of God, then we can relate to it in a very different way, rather than it's just a pebble and let me enjoy it and play with it on the water, as we did as kids. So, what do we have over here? We have the following. If we appreciate that even a simple stone is part of the divine plan, and wherever it is in this moment, it was meant to be there specifically for some purpose that we need to use it for. And from there we can then grow to a level of we can be sensitive even to a leaf and not uproot it from its place of nurture. And then from there we can grow and go further and have the sensitivity that whatever pain that we go through in our lives is not in order that we should say ouch and that it should hurt, but it's in only that we turn it inside out so we can truly be there for another and their bodily needs. And then from there we can go to the next level to really see the unique imprint and the uniqueness of every single individual, every single creation, human being on earth. But that's not it. We did leave something out. The next rung, which is not part of creation, but that which is beyond creation, God. What does that mean? So this is the uniqueness now of the Jewish people. The Jew is not just created in the image of God, but he is a soul, a divine soul that is literally, as the Alter Rebbe says in the 2nd chapter of Tanya, a part of God. What does that mean? Well, it means a lot. We'll deal with some component of it, but one part of it is that since we are a part of God, and every single Jew comes from the same place, we relate to each other, not because I have an obligation to you because of sense of community, not because I have an obligation to you because you're part of my Chabad house. I have an obligation, and it's not even it's beyond an obligation. I have a sense of oneness with you, with a fellow Jew, because we are of the same part of God. So this is not just conferring purpose now. This is even beyond purpose. Purpose is about doing something, fulfilling what you were created for. Our relationship to a fellow Jew rises beyond that. Even if the Jew is not fulfilling his purpose, and you can't get through to that Jew, that they should fulfill their purpose. Are you connected? Absolutely. Why? Because the part of God that's in me is the equal part that is in that Jew who may be very distant. When my wife and I first came to Montreal to the Chabad house, we were dealing with students. The first summer there, we had someone who was doing some work, renovations, and he had another individual working for him. remember it's very clearly, happened over 30 years ago, but Paul Paulson, not a very Jewish name. And, being a rabbi, so he wants to show his religious affiliation. And he, in his conversation, he tells me about going to church and, his connection, his commitment to God, and so on. In the middle of the conversation, he tells me, that my mother's Jewish. So I don't have to tell you the rest of the story, of course. So I tell him, Paul, not only is your mother Jewish, but you're Jewish. But not only are you Jewish, but you're as Jewish as I am. And you're as Jewish as the Lubavitcher Rebbe is. You're a complete Jew. He couldn't take it, couldn't handle it. A few days later, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, he calls us up on the phone, waking us up. Rabbi, no, it can't be. Are you really mean what you're saying? I said, absolutely. Does that make sense? No. If you are connected by purpose, by history, by experience, that's human. That makes sense. But here we're not connected by that. We're connected by something much deeper. Yes, we have a history together. Yes, we have experience together. Yes, we have a purpose that brings us together. Absolutely, no question about it. Nonetheless, there's something much deeper. We're connected in soul. And this is how we need to, first and foremost, relate to a fellow Jew. Actually, the relationship that we have with a fellow Jew is, in a sense, the deepest relationship that there is. Even deeper than your child that you have a relationship with as parent-child. As Jew to Jew, but not parent-child. Because parent-child means what? That you gave birth to a physical being, to a human being. Yes, a Jewish soul and so on, but remember that the mother is not what creates the Jewishness of the child. It's only the mother who's the conduit, and it's God's soul that's a part of him that comes through the mother, but's vested in the child, independent. So that relationship that we have to each other as fellow Jews is a much deeper one than just the bond that there is in a physical bond between parent and child. Just to bring this idea out even further, interesting in the Shema that we say, V'shinantam levanecha, and you should teach your children. What does the Talmud say? Who are the children? Your students, not your physical children. Why? Because your spiritual children, in a sense, are even greater than your physical children. Now, ultimately, what we want is that our physical children should be our spiritual children also. In other words, we inspire them in the teachings of Torah, and we are their teachers, not merely just, gave birth to them and brought them into this world. That's the optimum, obviously. But just to make a distinction between the two components is a very important thing to appreciate. So sometimes, by the way, it's very important when we look at our child that that's my child. What does that mean? That child is an extension of me. And therefore, you look at them as an extension of you and deal with them on, what you want from them. Rather, when you say, that is my child, or a Yiddish kind, God's child. And then when you will deal with that child, bearing that in mind, you will deal with them in a much more delicate, refined, and profound way. Because they're not just an extension of you. They're really got a godly soul, a Jewish soul. And when we recognize that, even with the dealing and the handlings of our children, we will relate to them, not merely as a mere reflection of me, but as God's child. If you take your children to little kids to the restaurant, right? We did it. And all of a sudden the kids are running amok and they're making a mess and you're grinding your teeth and you're telling them, sit down and, behave. What's the child feel at that moment or recognize, whether consciously, but most definitely subconsciously? And my parent isn't caring about me right now. They're caring about me because I'm wreaking havoc, and it's a bad reflection on them. So they're only relating to me as an extension of them. Whereas if you recognize that this is not merely a child who's an extension of you, but this is a Yiddish Kind, it's a Jewish child. I have a responsibility to this child. It's my child. I have a responsibility. So I got to teach them, and I will speak to them when they're acting out in the restaurant, not merely as a reflection of me, but as a Yiddish Kind. I'll say, come here. Do you know, everybody's seeing the way you're acting, and you're wearing a yarmulke. And they see that you're not acting appropriately. Imagine if they see that you acted appropriately, you can make a Kiddush Hashem, sanctify God's name. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Now, the child might not react to that immediately and deal with that immediately, but definitely the child will sense that you're speaking to them, caring for them, and trying to empower them as a Yiddish Kind, as a child, as a Jewish child. This is crucially important in our day. As we're coming, as we mentioned, Tu B'Av is Kaim Sehira B'Ashlemusa. The sun is full. The moon rather, is a full moon. We come from the days of Tisha B'Av, of destruction. And just as we come from the days of destruction, we come now to the days of completion of the Jewish people. The only reason we have a descent is ultimately for the ultimate descent, is for the ultimate ascent. The only reason we have two holy temples that were destroyed in order that we should have the third and final eternal home of the Jewish people to be rebuilt. What's going to rebuild that? We've been hearing a lot of things over the course of the last 5 days, and I'm sure you've heard this, but to re-emphasize it is very important. The strongest power in this world are the Jewish people. There is no power greater. When we are united as one, there is no force that can defeat us. What we need to do is to strengthen the Jewish people. Yes, we need the soldiers with their Uzis, absolutely, as they so, in a dedicated manner, giving literally of their lives to protect not just Jews in Israel, but ultimately all of us. But we need to create, which was now a unity, an unbelievable unity amongst the Jewish people that probably has not been since the 6-Day War. But the problem with this unity is exactly what we spoke about till now. It's external. It's been forced upon us by Hamas and company. What we need is an internal unity. When we recognize how we are truly brothers and sisters, as my wife and I always get complimented, and as every shliach does, nothing special to us, gets complimented on how we're, take care and so lovingly open up our homes and are there for people. You're so nice. I said, it's not true. Not so nice. I really do believe you're a brother and a sister. I really do believe that. You're nice to your brother and your sister. You're to your brother and your sister. You do, of course. Because it stems from an internal sense of connectivity to another Jew that is so profound and so deep. But of course. And when that is the teaching that we bring to every single Jew, how we are so one and so united on that internal level, then this will be the ultimate force that will bring from destruction of baseless hatred to the ultimate baseless love. The only reason we ultimately love and connect is not just because you have great value, but even deeper than that, because we are truly one. So the question is, why is it on the Shiva call that people do not speak? The halacha is that one should not speak to the mourner until the mourner speaks to them. You're there to comfort them. Comfort not necessarily means words. The mourner may not want to speak, And therefore, you need to respect that and know that just being there is a comfort. Hence, if they begin the conversation, then they are signaling to you that I want to talk. Let's talk. But if they're not, so then they're signaling to you, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. In the end, by the way, you do say, you do make that statement, and you do give a blessing or say words of comfort, but as making conversation, that's not necessary. And that's why one of when Abraham had passed away, Jacob, his grandson, was making lentil soup. A mouth that is closed, because the mourner has a closed mouth because of the grief and the pain that they're going through. Excellent question, just to repeat it. How do we deal with people who have either heard us or people who are not good people and they happen to be Jewish, right? How do you relate to them? Well, let me give you an extreme example. Bernie Madoff, right? If I were to go to the prison where Bernie Madoff is, and I would be able to talk to him, I'd put on tefillin with him. The class I gave earlier was on the 12 steps of tshuva, of repentance. I would teach it to him. He's still a Jew that needs to study Torah, to engage in a mitzvah, even though he has done a great atrocity. So you hate the evil, but not the evildoer when it comes in that instance. In that instance, you hate the evil, and you want to eradicate the evil, but you don't hate Bernie Madoff as a Jew. No, well, if a person hurts you, that's already, it depends what, that's a very complicated question, because it depends what it means that they hurt you. What we just learned in the Tanya, in Igeres HaTshuva, we just finished, is imagine if someone hurt you and you don't give back a humiliation for humiliation, right? Tit for tat. Or better, even a higher level, you don't retort at all. Or even a higher level, you actually are joyous because of the pain that they have given you. Why would you be joyous? So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, because you realize that whatever pain and suffering I'm going through was meant for me and will actually help cleanse my soul. So even though that person has what to better themselves, but the effect that befell me is something that I should take with joy, to such a degree, as the Alter Rebbe concludes in the 11th chapter of Igeres HaTshuva, he says that the highest level is that if a person will forgive the harmful way of another individual, God will forgive all your sins. That's how important it is, the sense of being forgiving to a fellow Jew, is it speaking about, that pained you, hurt you, and you are able to be forgiving. It is so profound and such a deep connection, therefore, you must have with that individual, that God, just as you were able to dig so deep, God will dig so deep within you, and He won't see any sin. He wipes it away, even those sins that were done intentionally. That's how powerful it is. So it doesn't mean that, there's two things. If you're responding to someone's negativity from a moral standpoint, then you could be upset at that person and even show anger in order to direct them in the appropriate way that they need to go in their lives. But if it's because you're hurt, so it's not because of the lack of morality of the individual, but I'm now retorting to you because I'm pained by what you did to me, that's not a healthy place to come from. And there, Alter Rebbe says, again, it's based on the Talmud, that if we try to dig deep internally within ourselves and to be forgiving, then God forgives us. And furthermore, when he even goes deeper to understand that the pain that I'm feeling, the suffering that I'm going through, understanding that, listen, I've done wrong in my life. And because I've done wrong in my life, there might be things I need to suffer for in order to cleanse. Let that be the cleansing for those things that I have done, rather than the cleansing should come after 120 when it'll be much worse, much more painful than it is now. Thank you very much.